So, I mean, I guess we're a lot of people here today. It's kind of overcrowded, so don't take up all the seats. So I want to start out by inviting our panelists today, Ehsan and Suresh. So the goal of this panel, it's a bit of a general topic, right? Like, why is blockchain important for businesses? We can talk about that the whole day, but the idea is to kind of dissect that into takeaways that you guys can take home, talk to your friends about. So we're kind of going to dive into why is it a good thing? What are some use cases? What are some drawbacks? And how can we improve? So I can maybe start with a bit of an introduction just to kind of add to what Andreas said, and I'll let our panelists introduce themselves as well. So I started in the space back in 2017. As I was doing my degree in aerospace, I also started doing some Ethereum development. It wasn't cool back then to put crypto on your LinkedIn. So I was kind of like Batman, like doing aerospace in the day and then like going home and doing some development stuff at home. And then I started incubating the very first sort of Web3 games, very low graphics, but very tokenomics focused. And then I was the first hired person in Polygon to kind of go in that gamify field, figure out how to get more projects building on their chain, and also figure out how to entice more developers to want to use Polygon. So some advisory, giving some grants. And now I'm officially with LedgerLink Labs. So we do fundraising for the top 1% of Web3 gaming projects, as well as being a mentor for Outlier Ventures. And I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. Ehsan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. So I'm Ehsan, co-founder of Functionland. I'm an engineer, like I studied engineering, then got into programming world like 15 years ago, and deep dived into Web3, like starting with creating a dApp first, and then we co-founded Functionland with my colleague. And the idea was to free our data from central clouds because that's the nature of Web3. That's what it came to life for. And we started Functionland. We created this decentralized network for decentralized data storage where people can rent each other their extra storage spaces. Yeah, and Suresh.
Yeah, good morning all. So I come with 2 decades of experience in the field of information technology, started from the scratch, but now I am a co-founder for NFT Pedal, Certified Coders, and NetSet Digital. So I am part of board advisory for a couple of firms. At the same time, my passion towards blockchain pretty much, evolved around like 2014. Now I am advising, advocating, and consulting in various practices for various organizations. Thank you.
Thank you for that intro, guys. I mean, the first question that I want to start out with is there's this idea that many technologies have tried and failed at solving trust. And we're all looking at blockchain to kind of try to solve this enigma. So maybe that's something that we can start with. Maybe we can start with Suresh or Ehsan, since you're since you already have the microphone.
Yeah.
In your opinion, how does blockchain attempt to solve trust, and why is that a good thing for businesses to like try to dabble with at this moment?
So, first I want to start with what is the problem of trust right now in the current infrastructure. When we talk about blockchain, the contrast that comes to our mind is central servers. And the problem is right now for individuals and businesses alike, using services from these central servers is like dating a narcissist. They love bomb you with free trials, with features that you like in the beginning, constant follow-ups from their support team. But after you fall in love, you are committed, your data is locked into their platform, they take it away. They just provide you with the bare minimum services that you need to just keep going and asking for more. And that's a real problem because, like if anything goes wrong, it's your fault because you agreed to that terms that we showed you in the beginning, although you didn't read it, right? And blockchain comes with 2 features that are really like, that really can address those problems. One is transparency. So Data on blockchain is verifiable by everyone. So if you think something is not making sense, you can go on a public chain and verify it yourself, right? So you don't need to trust someone on their support team to verify the data. The other thing that I believe is more important is no authority exists in blockchain. So for example, like when we look at the Web2 platform like Twitter, someone like Elon Musk can ask their staff to just, promote his tweets. But on blockchain, it's a piece of code that manages the whole thing. So no one has the authority to change the system. Most blockchains are open source, so you can audit the codes. Most blockchains are managed by a DAO, so a decentralized organization. So the decisions are not made by one person to change that code. And that's really a big win. So we are not dependent on people to manage or we don't need to trust those people. And most people can trust code more than a person's decision. So I think that's how blockchain can really increase the trust for businesses and individuals alike.
I mean, that was a really good answer, Ehsan. I think, Suresh, you're more on the consulting side, so maybe you can give us some of the reasons that you give your clients about trust.
So it's pretty human tendency that now we have to trust but verify, right? The verification part is taken care as part of the trustless network of blockchain. When I say trustless, it means blockchain takes care of validation because it is transparent, it is immutable, which means that both the parties who are involved in the transaction has access to the information available as far as they have the right permissions. So trust pretty much plays a role when it comes to compliance, ethics, or even we can create a circle around who has access to what information, and that is very much easy. At the same time, we are not dependent on a centralized server. We don't need to have a middleman in order to validate the trust part of the aspect in blockchain.
I mean, I find it also interesting as well that since the space kind of started almost 10 years ago, that it's evolved so much, from extreme decentralization and we're seeing a lot more centralization right now. Do you feel that for businesses to actually implement blockchain, there needs to be some sort of hybrid?
So, centralization came into blockchain to make it easy, it's actually a business model that existed because running a node was hard. So a lot of companies started to run nodes for you. We probably heard of Pinata. So it started to run IPFS nodes for you on AWS. So that's where the centralization came to exist. I personally believe that it takes time to take that centralization away. It's necessary and it's possible. It just needs more education, a change of the mindset, because right now, a lot of businesses, the mindset and the business model is still around centralization. Taking that central part away, that requires time and education, but that's possible. And I believe it happens in the future. But right now, that's a good step forward because centralization makes things smoother for businesses. It allows them to just, enter this space without much technical knowledge, run nodes, use the benefits, and still still don't need to change a whole lot of things.
I mean, I've seen it a lot as well with the degens where there's almost this rebellion against centralization, no single point of authority. Maybe Suresh, can you talk to us about some of, the companies that you've worked with? How important is decentralization for them?
Especially when it comes to, healthcare, fintech and insurance, organizations, decentralization plays a very vital, role in terms of reducing the speed of the transactions, because you don't need to depend on each other. You have access to all the data. At the same time, from an authority standpoint, that's why we create DAOs. right? So we have a central governing authority so that, the data is being contained, validated at the same time. Invalidation also happens with the consensus of DAOs. So that's what we aim towards. And distributed computing is something we learned, since 3 decades. But now this is like new form of distributed ledger, which took an evolution of blockchain, right? So I think most of them has a kind of let's say a sentimental value. Like, we need to own the data, but data can't be owned by anyone in future. I mean, next 3 years, it's about the consumer who will let the organization or the corporates know who has access to what.
And this is something that you and I have spoken about previously, Ehsan, is like this idea that both parties, so like the consumer and the business, can also monetize because the consumer knows where their data is going because everything's on chain. I always joke about like the centralization, like let's say, for example, like private blockchains are essentially like just databases, right? I'm curious to explore with you guys, like just some very clear-cut examples of having, on-chain transactions. So cross-border payments come to mind where you don't have to wait for 5 days for it to hit the bank. So is that something that we're talking about? Because like a lot of people touch on the philosophical concepts, which are important intrinsically, but more so on a practical level, what do you see the actual benefits of going on chain?
So one of the actual benefits, as you mentioned, is the removal of that middleman. So it's not just the time that it takes to send the transaction cross-border, it's also you need to involve a bank in between, which can increase the cost and also the time. So with the blockchain, I can just send it to you quickly without anyone in between. Of course, without the government regulations for a few times, but they are catching up. So the other aspect of blockchain is, right now as a business, for example, when you onboard a customer to your system, the customer needs to re-enter their data, their information in your platform. And if they go to a different retailer, they need to, again, re-enter their data. So onboarding customer, for example, takes time, takes efforts. Everyone has to customize their platform. But if the data of the customer lives on chain, the customer comes to your store and they just give you access to their data, whatever they want to. So they don't need to re-enter anything, and you still get access to their data. And also, it's not the business liability anymore. Right now, there is a lot of hacks that are happening that are affecting businesses. A lot of the costs that businesses are spending is on the storage costs that are basically storing customers' data. So all those go away when we use like on-chain data and transactions. And, businesses can focus on their business model, like modify it, of course, but they don't need to pay for customers' data anymore. They don't need to be held liable for hacks that happen. And onboarding customers become easy, like few clicks, and the data is there. They don't need to re-enter data.
I actually wanted to be a little careful about approaching the topic of regulation because I feel like it kind of takes away from the conversation. Obviously, regulation does exist, and I don't think it can be a scary thing, but I think some regulation is good. I mean, in terms of like having on-chain transactions, everything is there, right? Like as long as you have the transaction number, you can see the amount, the parties that it was sent to. How big is a concern? Like how big of a concern is regulation to your clients, Suresh?
So it depends on the country, the area of operating, or the vertical which we work on. For example, healthcare, there is a HIPAA regulation. There is no fiddling around with that. But what happens in real time is today the patient care or the patient data is restricted to one specific organization. When we move it into an on-chain, or a blockchain network, you kind of give the permission to the interested parties with the consent of the patient. Without patient consent, we can't, right? So the semantics is about having a smart contracts, automated, so that it follows the workflow in a normal, for example, the current digital way, but at the same time, leverage the efficiencies of blockchain so that you can reduce the time of, accessing the data. The doctor need not call the other, hospital to get the patient data in order to understand what's going on with them, right? So this becomes, a much of a easier journey for the consumer to switch the care providers of their wish. They don't need to stick with them because, they have the data. So that gives the flexibility, which means, coming back to the Web3 principle, the consumer decides who has access to their information.
And I love the example that you brought about pharmaceuticals because, I want to touch on what are some of the industries that are actually applying blockchain. I mean, we've seen a lot of brand activations with NFTs, even in terms of like decentralized identities. We have soul-bound token nouns where you can basically like have, a chart of like your previous records and whatnot. But realistically, what are the industries that are actually applying blockchain?
Again, I would say hardly we touch the surface of adaptation when it comes to blockchain, but
Absolutely.
The industries which are like pretty much advanced towards adaptation, or one is banking and finance. They started exploring the KYC aspects as well as the money transfer aspect of the application. Healthcare, definitely. Supply chain and logistics. That's one vast area where it cuts down the heavy paperwork cost, because when it comes to tracking an asset or like imports or exports, so pretty much it's like one contract at each stage. So it cuts down the variable cost. At the same time, it improves the speed of transaction. And then obviously gaming, right? Now it's like,
One.
yeah, it's like pretty much you open the app, you have like 50 different gaming platforms on blockchain, pretty much, or which is like a network gaming especially. So yeah, I would say these are the prime breadwinners or like early adapters when it comes to the blockchain.
I think what's also interesting about gaming is that every action is a transaction, and what better way than to store it on chain, where like you can literally go back and obviously like depending what chain you're on, you would want like a layer 2 for it to be faster. But I'm curious to explore with you guys like within like the nature of this topic as well, because I have seen some very creative revenue models on chain, so like on chain royalties. Maybe Ehsan, you can kind of touch on that and tell us what are some of the creative on chain revenue methods that you've seen recently.
Yeah, like because blockchain is new, like businesses are still adopting like new business models to around like this new infrastructure. One of the like actually primary ones is P2P services, like peer-to-peer services that we all know about. So like individuals providing a service to another individual, and then the creator of the blockchain or that DAO actually takes a portion of the transactions, right? So like, for example, Filecoin is one of the major ones, like individuals providing storage to other individuals, and then like in each transaction, they take a portion. Another type of businesses that are created now is consulting services, like consulting businesses and individuals on how to run nodes, how to like actually adopt blockchain into their business. And the other is blockchain as a service. So that's the one that we touched upon like in the initial conversation, like, so because running a node is hard for both individuals and businesses, like some businesses are creative that allows you to run nodes on their platform. They take out the complexity and they manage it for you. So it's like a managed blockchain service, like companies like Microsoft actually partnered with Consensus, for example, which allows you to run an Ethereum node for Azure users. And like those, like it's still like new business models are being created because that's still new. So like, and it requires a change of the mindset for business owners, because right now in Web 2, the mindset is I own customers' data and I monetize the data itself. But the new mindset should be we both, like the business and the customer together, share the revenue that that data is generated. And gaming was a good example, you know, like because in gaming, the customers, the users are the ones who are generating revenue for the business. And they should earn part of that revenue for themselves, right? And blockchain enabled that.
That's a really great answer. We have about 2 minutes left. I just wanted to check in, maybe if anybody had a question before we can go into closing thoughts. Just ask me your questions later. If you're shy, it's okay. Or you can ask Ehsan or so I kind of want to end this with a closing thought. What would be your best advice for companies that are considering implementing blockchain? Like, what would be like your one piece of advice?
I would advise, to first work on the business case. That's where we have the big three firms like, KPMG, Deloitte, and E&Ys of the world getting into this field. But there are real blockchain experts who can do the, right consulting. Get engaged with the consultant, see what makes sense. Everything boils down to what is the cost of transaction, because sometimes it may be pretty expensive when there is no returns. So the operating cost is something we need to always work on. And we have like a lot more consulting firms who can help them towards getting into this journey. And before I hand over my mic, I just want to give my book, which is Enterprise Guide for Entrepreneurs. Myself and my partner,
thank you,
just published it so that they can understand, how do we monetize their NFTs or their assets.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we can get this signed later for some of your readers as well.
Thank you.
Ehsan, I would love to hear what is your parting advice.
So my advice is, when you want to enter Web3 and blockchain, just change the mindset, like think differently. Don't try to enter with the same mindset that you have in Web2. Like, for example, we saw that Meta, like Facebook, actually, they tried to enter Web3 and crypto with not much success. And I believe that's because the whole business model is around Web2, is around monetizing, specifically monetizing and owning users' data. So if you want to enter Web3, just try to like create innovative ideas on the monetization ways. So just don't try to just monetize users' data for yourself. It should be a sharing. Like that's how the Web3 works, is collaboration and sharing with each other.
It is one of the most open spaces, I would say, and everyone is kind of in the beginning of this movement where they want to share knowledge, they want to share information. I've actually never reached out to anyone that has been, like not willing to help me in this space. So yeah, ask questions, reach out. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this panel. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the conference.
Thank you, everyone.